Hello there. Happy Thursday to everybody in our audience. Welcome to our Facebook Live today. Whether it's early in the morning, like it is for our guests today, or late at night, wherever you are located around the world, it's great to see you in our audience. So thank you so much for tuning in today. We love doing these Facebook Lives at MyHeritage, having experts from all over the world on many, many different topics that are of interest to our viewers. So it's just great to see you all joining us. I see Philomena from Ireland and Mary from BC, Canada, and Matthew's tuning in, and John from Ireland, a bunch of Irish viewers here in the audience. So thank you so much for tuning in to all of you. If you haven't yet, please let us know where you're joining from. We'd love to see all the different spots around the world that we are reaching. It's so wonderful to have you all in the audience with us today. Holiday where, besides buying flowers for those female, for the matriarchs in your family, we also can research our female ancestors and learn more about them and these powerful women for Mother's Day that I wanted to tell you about. We have the MyHeritage DNA sale for Mother's Day. So we have DNA kits that are on sale for Mother's Day. We'll put a link in the comments section so that you can all take advantage of that and get the mothers in your life, get them a great gift for Mother's Day. If you haven't picked anything up yet, now's your chance. We'll put a link to that in the comments section. In addition, we also have the Moms in My Family competition. That's our Mother's Day competition, where we are asking you to share the photos of the mothers in your family. And we've received some really beautiful, beautiful entries of people who have shown 4 or 5 generations. It doesn't all have to be in the same photo. It could be if you have a multi-generational photo, that's fantastic. Some families aren't so lucky and they don't have every 5 generations next to each other in one room. Which is okay. And then just send us the different photos side by side. We'd love to see those. So we'll put a link to the competition in the comments section as well. So now I'd like to introduce our speaker. We have with us a genealogy rock star that we love having on our show, Thomas MacEntee. He is always such a pleasure to have here on our Facebook Lives. And he is just so knowledgeable about all things genealogy and MyHeritage. So let me bring him on to say hello to everyone. Quite early in the morning, Thomas. So we really appreciate him taking the time for us.
Hi, Esther. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. It's a little bit early, but you are the first of 4 webinars for me today, so it's going to be a busy day.
I'm glad we got you. We got you at the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we're really looking forward to this. I know that it's just such a nice way to celebrate Mother's Day, to learn more about the matriarchs in your family.
Right, exactly. And I'm going to go ahead and share my slides over here, and you should be able to see my first slide, right?
Yes, let me bring it up here for you.
Okay, great.
There we go.
Great. So I want to welcome everyone. I'm Thomas MacEntee from Chicago. It is cold here today, 50 degrees high and rainy. But May is always a touchy month in Chicago. You never know what's going to happen. But we're here for finding female ancestors. I'm not an expert in the topic, but I want to share with you my tips and tricks that I've developed. Unfortunately, what it comes down to is, and I'll explain this, even up until 1920s, at least in the US, women were chattel. They were property. There are some people that don't even research the females that marry into the family. That's how biased genealogy can be. By the way, this photo here, One of my favorites, and I've actually run it through, I think, the enhancer on MyHeritage Photo Tools. This is my grandmother, Anna Henneberg, born in 1912 in the Bronx. And this is my mom right here, born in 1941. And these are all the girls. My mother had 7 sisters. It was a big family. I don't know how my grandparents did it, raising 12 kids in New York. So this is a needed area. We're always going to have to search females. That's all there is to it. The thing is, the approach has got to be different. Unfortunately, at least US records, and I think many records around the world, are biased towards men in terms of listing them. Look at the US Census. From 1790 until 1840, it was the head of household, and most head of households were male, and that's all you see. Otherwise, for women and children, they're relegated to check marks off to the side. So I'm going to share with you some of my tips on strategy that have really worked for me. Unfortunately, you have to start with the husband. So that's basically what happens. Look for the husband's records. Use the husband's name to search for marriage records. Search for death records. Maybe the husband's death record has the wife as an informant. That may not give you the maiden name, but also using the husband can get you to the female ancestor's death certificate, where maybe the husband or a son or daughter were the informant. Then you have to count on that they know the maiden name. How many death certificates have you found? I've found a lot where, you're going through and the maiden name listed for the mother is same as the married name because the children didn't know it. And do you have the correct name? I'm going to see if I can go out to another screen. Esther, let me know if you can't see this spreadsheet or if I need to share it. But this is my research log for one of my ancestors, Anna McPhillips. And basically, I did find her birth date and everything like that. But let's talk about name variations. Look at the list that I started to build. This is one of the things that we don't do as genealogists. We try and keep it all up in our head. I always have a list of given name variations, meaning the birth name, as well as the surname variations. And on this one, I didn't realize that there's a variation called Rosanna for my ancestor, Anna McPhillips. This is a woman that was killed in the Bronx in 1925 when a car pinned her against a building. And all my family ever told me was it was Anna Austin. I didn't even have a maiden name. So I had to start with the husband. And then I also needed to look up all the name variations. And that's really, really important. Let's go back to our slideshow. There we go. So do you have the correct name? And also don't forget nicknames. I found Annie Austin in the 1920 US federal census. Check the middle name. Many times the middle name for a child, male or female, can be a maiden name. I'll give you an example. My second great-grandfather, William Dence Austin. The Dence, D-E-N-C-E, was not his mother's middle name or his mother's middle name, surname, but it actually went back a few generations. It was really interesting. So William Dence Austin, his grandmother was Hannah Dence. And so go ahead and track those as well. And they want to keep that name alive. Of course, in a patriarchal system, the wife assumes the man's name after marriage. And so this is one way of looking for those clues. Even if you see a middle initial, try and search it out. What are the naming traditions? This is always interesting. I know with my New York State Dutch, God bless them, but they would reuse given names for children. And also, there were surnames. It was not very often you would find surnames. Also, where I have found surnames are city directories. But for naming traditions, Greek genealogy is perfect because usually there is a strict order. The first boy is named after the father's father. The first female is named after the father's mother. And then you go on down there. And so you can roughly get an idea and then search out those birth names, those maiden names. Timeline. I cannot tell you how important this is. It's the best way to stand back from your research and see what the gaps are. I'm going to go over to a site called Time Toast, and let's see if we can find it. And it's right here. It's called timetoast.com. It's free. I am using the paid version. The paid version is it's minimal. I think $1.99 a month. But the thing is, you can create these timelines. And look at here. I have the death certificate for Anna McPhillips. I have the birth certificate, and this is where I found out she was actually born under Roseanne. So that's another variation. Let's go over to our list. And so I've got Anna and I've got Roseanne McPhillips. And so that's another one that I'm going to add because I didn't have it. So that is, you come up with a way of doing this. And let's see, there we go. Trying to get to my slides. Perfect. So a timeline is great because you can start creating events. 1900 census, 1910, 1920, and guess what? 1930, Anna McPhillips is not around. Even on the 1925 census from June 1st, she's not around. So that tells me that the death was before June 1st. Of course, the census is not going to give me her maiden name. But I think the timeline is very important in pointing out, oh, I could go with this document. Maybe this document for this event would help. Also, who's talking? Who is doing the talking in the family? I will tell you, for my family, it was always the women. If you wanted to know family history, you went to the women. My great-grandmother, who helped raise me, she was just a great source of information. And now my oldest aunt, one of my mother's sisters, since my mother has since passed, she is my go-to source. When I say, hey, what was it like growing up in New York City with 11 siblings? So I think also my advice is please interview your older female ancestors now. There's no excuse. We have so much technology. Do a Zoom recording. Of course, they're going to have to feel comfortable with it, but let's continue that tradition of having women being the griots, the storytellers, the keeper of the family history. But you've got to tap into that right now. Also, browse a variety of records. The thing is, there's certain things that you might not think of. One that I always use are marriages and births, marriages and baptism. Why? The witnesses. Now, usually a female will be listed as a witness. Unfortunately, if she's married, it'll say Mrs. John Davidson or John Davis, but that gives you another name to start searching. Remember, we're going to go with the husband. So for this sister or this woman that we don't know the maiden name, we're actually going to go and find out from the witness list how she's listed, get an idea. Obituaries are also great. Those obituaries will show how someone is related to the person that's died. And then you can sort of, even if it's a married name, then you can sort of do that search and start with the husband. The fan club. Friends, associates, and neighbors. I know I keep saying this all the time, but you need to understand the social and volunteer circles that your female ancestor worked in. And so there might be listings, quarterlies, yearbooks, newspaper articles. Go ahead and check that. Still, it might be still hard to find a maiden name, but you're going to learn more about that female ancestor, which might spur you to think of other record sets. Personal records. I think that women tended to just write more letters. They were usually more apt to keep a diary or a journal. I have a diary here from 1867 from one of my female ancestors. It's one of those little church diaries in a cloth binding. But if you get those items, first thing is, of course, for letters, diaries, scan them, digitize them, preserve them, and then go through and transcribe them. And you might get a better idea of how they lived, but also maiden name in those records. So what are the best records for finding female ancestors? Well, this is in no particular order. Maybe it is. Marriage records. A marriage record is almost always going to have the maiden name and hopefully the parents' names of the female. The death records. Again, remember, this is secondary information. There's an informant involved. The informant might be grieving. They also might be ignorant of some of the details, like a maiden name. So they go secondary. Cemetery records, yeah, it depends. Usually it's difficult to find a maiden name, but you might be able to. Remember, you're going to see who else is that woman buried with besides her husband, or if she's even buried with her husband. So you're going to go, when I'm at a cemetery, I go one row back and one row up because they may be related. Newspapers. The newspapers are great, especially for a marriage announcement. That's probably your best bet. Obituaries can be difficult. Usually the woman was listed under her husband's name, Mrs. John Davis. So you're not going to be able to identify them. Census records, yeah, the only way that this would work probably is if the female was recorded in a household where her relatives lived nearby. I go through the whole enumeration district, if I can, to try and look for any connection. Land records. Sometimes you will see, depending on the state, a female's maiden name, her birth surname. Church records, especially around baptism, in the Catholic Church, confirmation, anything like that, and of course, marriage records. Probate records and wills, yes, you will almost always see the woman's birth name. Military pensions and service records. No, it's not about women serving in combat or serving in the armed forces. Here in the States, especially for Civil War pensions, the widow would have applied for. Also, if the husband applied for a pension due to disability, there would be quite a few files, affidavits, witness statements, and there might actually be one from the female ancestor. And then your passenger list and naturalization records. More on the naturalization records. It depends on when your female ancestor got married. We do know those bride ships. We had them from Greece in the 20s that they brought over women. So it could be their maiden name, but also on the naturalization records. Keep in mind, here in the States, up until a certain point, a woman, if she gained U.S. citizenship through marriage, she could easily lose it once the husband died. So there may be some records along that point. And oh my gosh, we always forget about school yearbooks. I was just looking at my mother's from 1960. It's crazy. But you know, for her senior year, she had her own little section with her full name, her home address, her photo, all the clubs she belonged to, etc. And of course, autographs and signatures. Let me show you. Did you know that here, MyHeritage, I almost said Ancestry, has a yearbook's name index that I use all the time. 253,000 US yearbooks, over 250 million records. This is a good way to start. Now, you may not find a senior section, but don't forget class photos, candids, club photos, things like that. And a lot of times this goes hand in hand with newspaper. Many times, some type of club photo for a yearbook, I usually find will end up in a local newspaper, depending on the town. Let's go back to our slides. So, what are you going to do about finding those female ancestors? Well, it's all the same records, all right, for finding male ancestors, but your research strategy has to be a closer inspection and a different type of inspection for the female records. That's really, really important. Before I end, and before I bring Esther back, I want to see how I am on time. Not bad. Let's go here. I want to remind you about this challenge. Esther did say something about it in the intro, but go ahead and start putting up your mom's photos or mothers in your ancestry line. I have a few that I'm going to do. And go ahead and enter. Basically, you can win a MyHeritage Complete package, which is sweet. You can always contact me at highdefgen@gmail.com with a question. I will try and get back to you as soon as I can. And here's a little bit about me and proof that my mother was right. I have a face made for radio and a voice made for print. And this is where you can find me. I have 33 different cheat sheets about genealogy if you go to my website. So, Esther, how was that? There you are.
There I am. It always takes a second to put the pieces back in.
All right. Yeah, I came in on good time. I was worried it was going to be too long, but this is a nice, 20-minute TED Talk type time. Yeah.
No, it's fantastic. And I can see that there's a lot of comments here that the tips were really, really helpful.
Yeah.
Paul said, I like the your one row back, one row forward tip. And let's
cemeteries,
see. Yeah, just a lot of, Wendy said so many great tips. They're just so great. And if you haven't yet and you have a question for Thomas, please let us know in the comments section. We're also going to put a link to Thomas's handout from today in the comment section, so you can all check it out as well. We do have a couple short questions.
Yeah, I do want to bring something up. Joan just mentioned, and that's a good one. The application for Social Security is called an SSA 5. It's a form here in the U.S. that you can. Sometimes you can't see the image online, but Family Search and other places have the index, and you have to order the form, and it can be very, very useful in getting that maiden name information. Great point, Joan.
Fantastic. And we'll put a link to your handout. For those of you who don't know, the handout is actually on the MyHeritage knowledge base. That's education.myheritage.com, which is a great resource in general. Thomas and I were discussing it earlier, just about all the different topics and articles that you can find there. And there are many, many more to come.
So, Esther, if I can ask you a question,
Sure.
How does Israeli culture handle maiden names? I mean, can I ask you, is Schumann your birth name or your married name?
Schumann is my married name.
Okay.
And actually, in my family, it's happened on my side and also on my husband's side. A bit of an interesting story, if we're talking about last names, is that my husband's last name is not really supposed to be Schumann, because when the family moved to South Africa, they found somebody to sign for them whose name was Schumann. So they changed their name to Schumann. So that was his grandfather originally changed his last name. So, and I think that is very common in a lot of families, that when they moved around to different countries, they changed their name just to kind of get someone to sponsor them or bring them over.
Right, exactly. And the other thing is, this is why I like the Spanish cultures. They tend to have a naming convention that combines the mother's maiden name and the father's name. And so, I know that, I've seen many lectures on that. And, but I think mostly that's what it is women, they assume the married name, and that's how it's easy to lose that maiden name. I love the idea of using it as a middle name for a child to perpetuate that name. Can I ask what your maiden name was?
Sure, it's Weinberg.
Oh, okay, that's right. I do know that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So.
Yeah. So maybe they were winemakers in the past.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, I know what the name MacEntee means scholar in Gaelic, and but my mother's maiden name was Austin, Austin, and I've been able to trace that back to 1628 in Rhode Island, which is pretty phenomenal. Yeah.
Wow, incredible. We do have here, I see Paul said a lot of Irish surnames drop the O to localize their name.
They did. In fact, with my situation, the original name was McEntee, and my great-grandfather in 1900 added the A because as an Irishman in New York, he had trouble finding work. So basically, he just started to do that. So it's amazing the reasons why a name can change.
Yeah, and it's just so incredible. Those stories are just, as long as they're passed on and preserved, that's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we do have a couple
Sure.
questions. Um, let's see. I have one here. Sherry asks, were there records of naturalization for women when their husbands were naturalized?
There would be. I don't think a lot of women, especially if they were older, that they bothered, but because it was a process. But I have found them. I have found some of them for when the husband died, the woman lost her citizenship here in the US and she had to reapply. So yeah, that's where what I would start with is first search for the husband. Again, I hate to say that you have to do that, but that is usually the portal to getting the female records. Yeah.
Okay. Um, let's see. We have Paul asks, any advice for tracing women entering religious orders?
Yes, believe it or not, if it's a US Census, they would enumerate convents usually at the end of the enumeration district. And so look through that. Usually a lot of those, records, they're not online. If you can find the order that the woman was in, then go to the archives for that order, search on Google, etc. They may have, but even in the census, you're not going to get a maiden name, but you're going to get a name for someone. And then you can start the process. Sometimes when a woman entered a convent or the order, it would be in the newspaper. So look for those articles as well. Yeah.
Definitely check out the newspaper collections on My Heritage.
Yes. Yeah.
Sandy asks, really stuck at finding any females lost at Auschwitz. Do you have any resources for me?
Yeah, of course, I always go to Jewish Gen. I would go to the U.S. Holocaust Museum or any of the resources in Israel, and I'm just not familiar as to how they recorded women, whether they would be recorded by their birth name or their husband's name. So I will say I'm not really familiar with that. Andre here says, "What would you recommend to do if the woman is from other countries?" And that's good. So the first thing is I'd start to look for passenger lists, look for any
Mhm.
citizenship lists, any passports. Also, if you can go to the country of, yeah, and go to the country of your origin, see if there are city directories, see if there's a census where that woman might be in the household with her mother and father. So, yeah. Also, Joan, thank you. She says to bring up Yad Vashem as a resource for the Auschwitz records. And yes, totally. So, yeah. Did you see Matthew's question here? My
Um,
paternal grandmother was born with one name but called herself something completely different. Yeah,
was
my
that
family.
common?
Oh, well, my family, none of the women go by their birth name. I've got an Aunt Pudgy, that's Julia, and so the thing is, that's part of difficult. It's very difficult. I doubt someone would put a nickname on a marriage certificate, but look at Anna McPhillips. Her birth name was Rose Ann McPhillips, but on her marriage certificate, she put Anna McPhillips.
Makes
Uh,
it very confusing for
it,
genealogists.
it does. And the thing is, though, this is one of those things where you didn't do a name change legally. Here in the US, just so you know, women can change their name when they apply for a new Social Security card after marriage. That's one way. In the US, don't forget, when someone was naturalized, they could select a new name. And very often, that surname, that old surname, gets buried. That's the only way to find it. So, yeah.
I saw that, I don't know who it was that said it, it passed in the comment section that in the UK now going forward, they're listing.
Yes, I saw the article yesterday. Yes, it's one of those things. I also think that you're going to see more European countries with civil unions allowing the use of the woman's birth surname. And so, yeah, I think there's just more of a realization that women, they've been hidden in records because of the inability to put their birth surname. Yeah.
Oh, here I see it's Matthew, and he wrote marriage certificates here in the UK are going to include mother's names as well as the father's now.
You're sure she wasn't running from something? It sounds like an alias or something. That's great. Yeah.
Um, let's see. Yeah, yeah. Beverly said, I have found my mother's maiden name was changed a few times, starting with her great-great-grandparents. And it was changed, the last name was changed a few times over the generations. That's very
Right. And I
interesting.
saw it, and the thing is, a lot of times names are changed because it's easier to pronounce. And here in the States, you want to look American. So I know the Greeks would do this. Instead of having metropolos, you might chop off the poulos and you'd be metro. There are a lot of Greeks named Metro. The sad part is the poulos tells you where in Greece they're from. So I'm always sad to see these names shortened to make it easier for Americans.
We have this question here from Audrey, and she asked, I can't find any info on my great-great-great grandmother. She was married to a Civil War soldier by the name of Rolls, but I have no idea her maiden name. She may have been Native American.
I would search for a Civil War pension, either his pension or a widow's pension. I would start with that, definitely. And those existed on both the Union and the Confederate side, but that's where I would start. Also, there's an 1890 U.S. veteran census to get more information on the veteran, but that's what I would do, Audrey. Yeah. I saw Janine's comment here. I love this. My grandfather's middle name was his mother's maiden name, and that was her starting point on finding that line. So it's really true. Middle names are a way to perpetuate a maiden name.
Oh, so interesting.
Lori's comment is common. I just found the obituary of my great grandmother, and even one of her daughters who passed before her is listed, but with her married name. That was it. You know, that was the convention. And so you do have to do that hunt. Yeah.
So fascinating. And Jolene says, after 20 years, I was able to find my great-grandmother's surname, Stastik.
Yeah.
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 Sorry for my mispronunciation. All my records have these spelling variations, lots of
Yep.
different spellings.
Yeah. And the thing
And
is,
that's
you
what I was
have
like,
to, yeah, you
oh,
have to
sorry.
keep that list. You have to keep that list, Esther. You know, the thing is, if they sit up here, you know, I'm not going to remember all the variations for Anna McPhillips. So start creating a list. Sometimes if you have to slap it up on your genealogy cave wall, at least you have it there to research. Yeah.
Such
Oh,
a
and
great
see,
idea.
yeah, look at the last comment from Ann Paris, and she's right. My last name is shortened from Paraskevopoulos to Paras when my husband became a citizen. Yeah, and you know, because on these long names, you know, it's a hassle to keep filling out forms or going to government offices and spell your name. So my husband's his name is Arvanitis, and I say it's like a disease. That's what I say. Yeah.
Does he appreciate that?
No, he fails to find humor in much of what I say. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And I think these
Sure.
were just such great hints and tips. Just really helping everyone to
Yeah.
research those female ancestors. We'll be putting a link in the comments to Thomas's handout, so make sure to check it out and
Great.
download that handout, as well as check out all the other articles that we have available on the MyHeritage knowledge base.
Yeah.
And research those moms in your family, those
Yes. Yeah.
maternal, your female ancestors, and you know, show your family, teach them something new about the women in your family this Mother's
Right.
Day.
Right. Exactly. And well, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to everyone here in the U.S. coming up on Sunday, May 9th. And thanks, Esther, again for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Such a pleasure to have you here in
Okay.
our Facebook Live. And don't forget, everyone, to enter our Mother's Day competition. We hope to see your entries soon.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
bye, everyone.